first of all, I want to say thank you for letting us come again. We always leave, well, if you came in the morning between on Friday and Saturday, you saw the mess. So it's amazing that we can get it cleaned up and get it going, but just such an incredible experience for our students to be able to come and interact with the kiddos, and we really had a great time, especially again this year. It was great. So I'm Becki Cohill. I'm an occupational therapist, and I'm also a faculty member and doctoral coordinator of the occupational therapy program at University of St. Augustine in San Marcos. It's a mouthful. I live in Colorado. That's how I met Andrea Miller, but I commute. I telecommute, so I get to come to San Diego for work. It's a bad gig. I have 2 of my own grown children and a husband and a dog. And I live in a little sweet town called Sugar City. So.
And hello, good afternoon. I'm Leah Foreman, occupational therapist and caregiver coach. I work out of Colorado, but we also do virtual visits nationwide, so I'm kind of connected throughout. And going to school, Becki was actually one of my professors, so I've got great connections here in San Diego and within this conference as well.
So we're going to talk about caring for the caregiver. And what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of flip the roles a little bit on you. So we're going to talk, you should get, there's some check sheets on tables. If you don't have one, there's some on the back chairs. And we're going to talk about sensory processing as it relates to us as adults and how it relates to us as parents, okay? So this quote, I think, is very relevant, and all of us have felt this way at some point in our lives. I know I have with my own children, and then I also have as a therapist, as an OT. So an escalated adult cannot de-escalate an escalated child. You know that little pick your battles, and those kids start to go, and then you start to go, and then it just kind of doesn't work that way, right? So we're going to try to give you some tips. We're going to talk to you about some of the things that we have found. We're going to take that sensory processing approach because we're all sensory beings, we're all human beings, and we're going to talk about what it is that helps us to kind of find that just right place. Okay, we're going to try a video. I think we've all been here at one point, but I want you to really pay attention to how the parent escalates on this, okay? I guess I should say that first.
Really?
The backpack goes in the trash can, we're just done.
Why is it garbage?
So you can hear Mom's voice is initially pretty calm and just reflecting and asking questions, and then listen to how she escalates herself.
Really? Pick that up. Pick that up! You me? Pick it up right now. Pick that up. Pick it up. Go throw it in the trash. Turn around, throw it in the trash right now.
Okay, so some of us have been in that moment where, right? Where we have to take that breath. So that's what we call dysregulation. And sometimes it's really nice to see what dysregulation is to be able to understand what regulation is. So we have 2 types of regulation. We have behavioral self-regulation, and that's the ability to act on your long-term best interest, consistent with your deepest values. This is what allows us to feel one way, really having a really rough day, but act another, okay? And so an example of this might be, it's time to wake up in the morning and it's time to go to work. And everything in your being is saying to you, I don't want to go to work today. But you have to pull it together and you have to regulate yourself in order to do the behavior that you think is expected of you. You want to be able to eat, you want a roof over your head, you want to keep your job, those kinds of things. So we act a certain way even though everything in our being is saying we don't want to do this. So that's behavioral self-regulation, okay? Emotional self-regulation involves control of, or at least influence over your emotions, okay? So emotional self-regulation. I'm going to give you an example from my own personal life. Just last week, my dog something was wrong. And he's a little corgi, if anybody knows what a corgi is, the Queen's dogs. So this little corgi, he wouldn't jump up, wouldn't eat, something was wrong. And my husband is very attached to this little dog. So the only time I could get a vet appointment was at 10:30. I had class at 10 o'clock for 2 hours, online, virtual, couldn't reschedule, couldn't do anything. He had to take the dog by himself. He was very upset about that, didn't know how he was going to handle emotionally some of the problems that were going on. And right now my house is a little destroyed because we had a tornado in July. And so the contractor decided to show up. As my husband was walking out the door with the dog all upset, I'm upset because he's upset, and the contractor shows up with some stranger that we didn't even know was coming, and I have to be online in 5 minutes, okay? So my emotional state at that point was like here. And I'm a pretty chill person. I just had 40 kids and 20 students. I can handle a lot of things going on, but my emotions were really high at that point. We're going to go back to those examples in just a little bit.
So then when we think about regulation with caregivers, just flip-flop here. When we think about regulation with caregivers, then we think about, of course, regulation with children. And we call the regulation that happens between caregiver and child co-regulation. So you are helping one another regulate. And to me, this is one of my favorite topics because co-regulation is a superpower that all parents have. You all already have this, and you're already doing things to co-regulate with your kid. You may just not know it's co-regulation. So why this is one of my favorite topics is because we get to get our calm and then share it with kids. So by doing this, we're teaching them to self-regulate themselves, and we're creating a safe space for them where they can have those big emotions and work through them in a space where they feel safe, secure, in a situation with a caregiver that they trust. And to me, that's a really beautiful thing that really only happens between people that really love each other. So when we talk about co-regulation, this can also go the opposite way. Many times when a caregiver is dysregulated, the child becomes dysregulated. So that's why to me this is so important to look at what is going on between caregiver and child. Are we regulated together? Is one of us dysregulated and the other one's regulated? How do we get in sync so that we can do life together?
Okay, so we're going to use the sensory processing model, and we're going to talk about, sorry about that, we're going to run each other off the stage here pretty soon. So we're going to use sensory processing. So a lot of you have probably heard of sensory processing. I think I talked about it a couple of years ago, or it was the first, I don't know. It was one of those. It was either 2 or 4 years ago. But sensory processing with kiddos. But we're going to talk about our own sensory processing and how that impacts our ability to regulate our system, okay? So sensory processing is a concept that summates the human being's ability to receive, organize, and use sensory information in everyday occupations. So all of you are getting lots of sensory input here. You're feeling your chair. You might be hearing the hum. I'm hearing some kind of hum like an air conditioner. You've got the lights. You might see movement out of the side of your eye. All this sensory information. You're hearing us speak, and you're processing that in your brain, okay? This ability is an essential component of preparation for use of sensory information in everyday life, okay? This is how we get through our life, right, is this sensory processing.
So then if we break it down, everybody processes sensory input in a different way. Something that's calming for me could be really alerting and absolutely obnoxious for you. And so that's why it's important that we know ourselves and our child and how they process information. People can be sensitive to sensory input. So for example, when I'm riding in a car, I really need to be in the front seat or I'm going to get car sick. And so that's something that I am sensitive to. And that ties into the sensory avoiding too. I'm avoiding being in the back seat so that I don't end up getting car sick. Something else along the lines of cars is I'm really sensitive to air fresheners that are in cars, those little trees. I get sick, nauseous, get a headache, so I'm really sensitive to that smell, that sensory input. Then we have low registration, and my husband pops into my brain on this one because registration is our ability to pay attention to sensory input and process it and retain it. And I will tell him, hey, can you go to the garage and grab the hammer and the drill and some screws? And he'll go to the garage and come back and say, wait, why was I in there? And I think we all do that. I do that sometimes too, but he popped in my brain on that one. Sensory seeking, sensation seeking, my brother popped into my head. He loves to go to those really loud concerts with the bright lights and the lasers and the mosh pit. He's seeking out all of that input, and he loves it, and that environment's my worst nightmare. So we all process all of this differently, and it's really cool. So the checklist that you have that we passed around, this is a list of different things that people use to regulate, adults and kids. And so it's interesting to look at this. Some of these things could be alerting for you, and some could be calming. Some could be regulating, some could be dysregulating. But it's really cool to get to know ourselves and what environmental stimuli do those different things for us.
So along with that self-regulation, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. I need to go to the microphone, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. I like to look at it as cups, okay? So our sensory regulation could be these two cups here. You can see the difference. One is small and one is big. Some days we have a big cup, right? This is so simple. Some days our cup is giant sized, and we can take a lot of sensory input. We can take, somebody coming up to us and maybe a tickle or something like that. No big deal, no whoop, I got this, okay? Big cup. Little cup days are those days where maybe you just got some news on the phone from a doctor, and maybe on top of that, your child is sick, maybe throwing up, maybe you have a headache, and your partner's out of town, okay? And on that little cup day, just one more thing, and somebody's going to do that same thing, that little touch, and you're going to fly off the handle, right? So your sensory system is overwhelmed, overloaded, and you can't do another thing. So that's the little cup day, okay? And evidence has shown that if you're let me go back on the slide. Sensory sensitive or sensory avoiding, you tend to have higher, this is for typical adults, all of us adults, any adult, that if your sensory system or sensory avoiding, if those are your characteristics, you have higher anxiety and sleep problems, and you have a harder time, you may catastrophize like healthcare problems with yourself. Okay? So there's studies out there, there's evidence that shows that those two things correlate with those. On the other side, you have low registration, and you would think that would correlate with sleeping, and it doesn't. There is no correlation between low registration and sleeping. However, a sensation seeker, I think this is important because a lot of kids I work with are sensory seekers. Sensation seeking actually correlates to less anxiety and better sleep. So that's, to me, really interesting. As an OT, we always get referrals for kids who are sensory seekers. I don't know that that's such a bad thing. But for all of us, the sensory seeking, because we've figured out ways to give ourselves that sensation, okay? So then we're going to talk about some of the specific systems, and you have this on your checklist. So vestibular is your inner ear, it's your movement, it's your position in space, it's where you are. It can be alerting or calming to people. So examples of this that are on the checklist are pacing, rocking, swinging, sports with movement, like running, right? Anything that involves running, driving, okay? So how does this work? So with me, alerting for me is I have to be in a chair that rocks. So when I'm working on the computer, which is all the time, I'm on the computer and I'm rocking, and I have a chair that rocks. And I make sure when I buy chairs that they rock, because I know I need that rocking, right? And so what's calming to me as far as vestibular, I'll be working, things get a little intense at work, maybe something's going on. I get in my car and I drive to the little coffee shop that's 5 miles away of Sugar City, and that to me calms my system down. Okay, that little tiny drive just to kind of whoof helps my system.
And then we have proprioceptive. So when we think of proprioceptive, we think of the sensors that are in our muscles and our joints, sending that information to our brain. For me, this is really calming, but what's alerting for me in this area is snacking. Crunchy snacks wake me up. That movement, that input into my jaw, and that crunchiness wakes me up. Something that's calming in this area is yoga, weightlifting. I have a weighted blanket, too, that gives me really good input into my muscles and my joints. That's really calming for me. And I love a good hug. My dad taught me how to hug really, really, really hard when I was little. At least when I was little, it felt really hard. And so now when I go into a loved one, I get that's too hard too, but I just love a good hug. And that's my proprioceptive input and what's regulating for me personally. And then tactile sensation, Becki was over here lightly touching my shoulder, and I was not like acting for the present. I hate light touch. It drives me nuts. It's alerting. I just don't like it. I'm not a light touch person. But something that is calming for me from a tactile standpoint is a really big, chunky, heavy, fuzzy sweater, especially when the weather's like today. And my dogs. When I pet my dogs, it's so calming for me. They're just so soft, and they're just the best. So those are my tactile things. And it was kind of funny. We were talking about this and when we were setting up this presentation, and my husband sent this video to me. I was like, that's hilarious, and it fits perfectly with our presentation. This one's really short.
Hi everybody, it's Paul. You know, a lot of people ask me, after a long day of voiceover or writing or doing all those creative things that I do, how do I relax? Well, like many other Americans, I come home and I pet my dog. You see, petting your dog is one of the most relaxing things you can possibly do. It releases a hormone called oxytocin, which reduces stress. Also, it lowers your heart rate. A lot of people
That's
ask
some
me,
interesting co-regulation. Obviously, he's regulating off of his dog, and his dog is not into it, like kind of how I react with light touch. We thought that was so funny. And then there's auditory. So I'm a really light sleeper, and I've always used white noise because it was recommended to me to do so. And it kind of always worked, but I would honestly wake up in the middle of the night and be annoyed by it and turn it off. And then somebody suggested that I look into pink noise and brown noise, which I guess are a thing. So I use brown noise now. Brown noise is calming to me, where white noise is stimulating. Go figure. And I didn't know that there were noises for colors or colors for noises, but these frequencies are really cool. You can kind of see how the brown noise is maybe less stimulating for me, but still does the same effect that the white noise is supposed to do.
And for me personally, I use music. Now I use music in 2 different ways. I use music to alert me. If I have a paper, I'm taking some courses, I don't know why, don't ask, but I'm taking some courses on population health, and if I'm needing to write a paper, I have to have music on, and then I can focus. It's really a great alerting. However, I also use music to calm myself down. So I am afraid to fly, which I fly to San Diego all the time. So I turn on my music, and as long as I have my music on and I have a certain playlist that I listen to, it calms my system down, okay? Oral can be alerting or calming. Chewing on pens, eating when upset. How many of us stress eat? Yeah, it's bad, it's bad. I like coffee in a ceramic cup with no lid, so I can make a mess everywhere, no. But I like coffee, hot drinks, that's calming to me. Popcorn, crunchy foods tend to be alerting. So if I'm working on a project, I will tend to use the crunchy foods.
And like I was talking about with the car air fresheners, olfactory or a sense of smell is really big to me. So something that doesn't drive me nuts like an air car freshener, but that is alerting is a peppermint oil, like a peppermint essential oil. So if I'm working on something on the computer and I'm kind of fading, I'll put peppermint oil on my wrist, or maybe even sometimes I put it right under my nose and it wakes me right up. Things that are calming to me from an olfactory standpoint, again, oils, lavender, vetiver, two of my favorites. They're really grounding and calming for me. And just natural scents, being out by the ocean, the beach, being in the woods and getting that fresh air, that smell is just unbeatable, and it's something that really, really calms me down personally.
So let's pull it all together. We had a half an hour. We could talk about this for probably 4 hours, but we want to give you a taste, and we want you to have something to take with you. So we want you to think about that example of getting up and going to work, okay? Think of all the things you do that either calm your system down and help you to behaviorally regulate yourself. Alarm. If I hear an alarm, my day is shot. It is done. I cannot do an alarm. I cannot do snooze. I hate it. I wake up before my alarm. I don't know why. So it's alerting. I don't like it, right? But then some of us get in a hot shower, and that's calming and kind of helps us start our day. However, when I go home at night, I take a bath, and that calms my system. So I alert, and I calm, and I alert, and calm with the same strategies. Okay, coffee. I have to pick my clothing based on my sensory system for the day. I'm like the original sensory processing kid. So this today was comfortable for me. I had like 3 different choices. Exercise and driving. Emotional self-regulation. So thinking about that situation where my dog was sick, my husband, the contractor, blah, blah, blah. I had 5 minutes to get online. The students were giving their big presentations. I had to be myself and be happy about it. So in 5 minutes, I used my vestibular system. I walked to my office because I'm living in a camper. So I walked to my office. I made a fresh hot cup of coffee because I knew that would help. And I do this hair pulling thing, which is really conducive to my hairstyle, and that's why I have this hairstyle. So on the way there, I just pull. And that's deep pressure, and it's calming to me. I don't know why, but it does. It works. So I do that. So I'm always
And as a student, I had never had any idea why she kept putting her hands behind her head, other than she was just excited. And then when we put this presentation together, it was like, oh, hair pulling. Maybe I'll try that. So it actually feels good. It's calming for me too.
So what we're looking at here, and the biggest thing, we need to wrap it up, but what we're looking at is how can we control our own sensory systems to bring ourselves back? What are the strategies that help you when your child is upset because they can't find the right barrette that they need to put in their hair and blah, 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 and they're starting to escalate? Is there a sensory strategy that you can use for yourself that you know works that kind of can help you bring it back down? Okay, so sometimes it's longer, like exercise, CrossFit, things like that, or sometimes it's just that simple, how about like this one? Let's give myself a hug. You know, let's do some deep pressure. Let's put our hands on our head and put pressure down, okay? So trying to find those strategies so you're better able to help your child de-escalate. That wasn't so bad, was it? 5 minutes over?